Well, we have to talk about this week's first subject, Brad. I saw this on Twitter last week, and I gotta say, it takes a lot to shock me these days, especially when it comes to like the weird things being pushed in schools, particularly on grade school kids. But this is a new level of weirdness and wokeness that has apparently crept into some California schools. I'll let you give us the main news of the day. But apparently they are trying to push a new woke program on kindergartners there, focusing on dismantling whiteness, dealing with racism. What all do we got in here?
Yeah, so if I told you that there were schools hiring a company called Woke Kindergarten, verbatim, that was the name, you'd think that was like too on the nose, right? You'd think that was like a parody or something. Yeah. But no, there actually is a for-profit entity called Woke Kindergarten, and we're going to get into it. But a public school in California used federal money, hundreds of thousands of dollars of federal taxpayer money, to pay this group to do trainings for their teachers to be implemented in their curriculum for very young children that are some of the craziest things you'll ever hear. So this story was broke by the San Francisco Chronicle. I'll just read a little bit of their reporting here. They say a Hayward Elementary School struggling to boost low test scores and dismal student attendance is spending $250,000 in federal money for an organization called Woke Kindergarten to train teachers to confront white supremacy, disrupt racism and oppression, and remove those barriers to learning. The Woke Kindergarten sessions train teachers on concepts and curriculum that's available to use in classrooms with any of Glassbrook Elementary's 474 students. The sessions are funded through a federal program meant to help the country's lowest performing schools boost achievement. But 2 years into the 3-year contract with Woke Kindergarten, a for-profit company, student achievement at Glassbrook has fallen, prompting some teachers to question whether the money was well spent, given the needs of the students, who are predominantly low income. 2/3 of the students are English learners, and more than 80% are Hispanic/Latino. Hannah, I just want to roll one video for you quick, which is it is labeled "Welcome to Woke Kindergarten." This is from the official Woke Kindergarten YouTube channel, where the person in charge of it or whatever introduces themselves. Take a listen to this.
Yo, hello everybody. My name is Akia. I also go by Key. Another name that I like for people to call me is Kia. When I was teaching kindergarten in my classroom, I used to go by Miss Akia, and sometimes I went by Miss Gross. If any of those names feel good to you, you can refer to me by any of those names. But it's important that I tell you that my pronouns are they, them. And by pronouns, I mean, you know how sometimes we refer to people as he did that or she said this. I don't like to be called he or she or any of those. So when you're talking about me and you say, Akia did that video, you want to say they did that video instead of he or she. That's how I like to be called. And you can talk with your families about what you like to be called.
So if I showed you that video and said that this person ran an organization and was going to be brought into a failing school to turn around their test scores and their inability to read, not to judge a book by a cover, but let's judge a book by a cover a little bit, would you have been filled with confidence in this person?
No, she sounds schizophrenic right off the bat. I don't know how you possibly have that many names. I mean, I'm watching this as a fully grown adult with a fully formulated brain and a pretty good understanding of the world around me, and it's a lot for me to take in. I cannot picture showing this to a 5 or 6-year-old and them even being able to wrap their mind around it. There's so many questions I have right out the gate. Like, first and foremost, my first thought when this was federal funding was this like the surplus of dollars some of these schools got for COVID? But it sounds like this is actually a special program the federal government is funding to help schools that are performing worse than everyone else. And yet it seems there are pretty much no parameters for what that kind of support should go to or what those sorts of improvements would look like. Because the fact that the school board had the ability to go do this with $250,000 is ludicrous. Secondarily, The fact that a group of grown adults were sitting in a room and were like, you know what we need to do? We need to create a woke kindergarten program. Like, this is just, these are not normal people. This is not a normal way of thinking. There's nothing about this that is focused on actual outcomes for these students that sound like they are in desperate need of not only reading and math, but English as a first language to instruction. And instead of getting that, they're getting this jumbled jargon. I love in this article, it even points out that many of the students in this school are having trouble speaking English, and their parents often don't speak English. And so you add that as a layer to this and trying to wrap your mind around this video as a 5 or 6-year-old, and then you have somebody coming in there trying to tell you about their pronouns. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Well, I want to show you a couple of the bits of content from this YouTube channel for Woke Kindergarten, which is a lucrative enterprise if they have $250K for a 3-year consulting contract. So I think we can see some of the motivation for it there. But listen to this video where they're teaching kindergarten age students about abolishing the police. And this is called We Keep Us Safe. It is an abolitionist text that explores the many ways that communities, not police, keep us safe.
We Keep Us Safe by Key, Woke Kindergarten. Who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. We clothe us. We feed us. We house us. We don't police us. We protect us. We teach us. We accept us. We don't arrest us. We love us. We believe us. We defend us. We free us. Who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. And you keep us safe too.
So they're not just advocating teaching kindergartners about police abolition, which also featured photos of the Pride movement and many other things. Again, this is for kindergarten. They also want you to teach about Black transgender issues in kindergarten. Take a listen to this video.
Just Like You by Key. Black trans people dream just like you. One of their dreams is to live their lives in the bodies that match how they feel in their hearts and minds, just like you. This is Dominique. She wanted to be a fashion designer. This is Dejanay. She wanted to be a lawyer. This is Vontasia and Bailey. They wanted to graduate high school. This is Layleen. She wanted to help people. This is Malaysia. She wanted to be a journalist, and she wanted to keep trans people safe. This is Tony. He just wanted to feel better. They deserve to feel safe, just like you. They deserve to fulfill their dreams, just like you. They deserve to feel loved, just like you. They deserve to live long, beautiful lives, just like you. Because their lives and their dreams mattered, and still matter, just like yours.
So what you just heard was from a text that is part of the Woke Kindergarten materials called Just Like You, that is, quote, dedicated to our Black transcestors who never had the opportunity to live their freedom dreams because they were killed before they ever had the chance. The children will understand this text easily because they will see themselves. They can empathize and relate. They have dreams too. They feel love too. They want to feel safe too. Please build on these relational truths as you engage with this text. So Hannah, I've given you a little bit of a taste of this curriculum and training and the kind of materials and emphasis that it has. What's your thoughts? Do you think this is going to be the antidote to help this struggling school where the kids can't read and do basic math?
No, I think they might need extra therapists because honestly, have you tried talking to I'm really curious because I know a 6-year-old that's in my life. And so I know about this age range and what their mental capacities are. I don't know how much you're around that age range, but even just the suggestion of somebody dying in Harry Potter will send this child into a crying fit. They're terrified of this kind of stuff. You're going to show them videos of people who were murdered or who killed themselves because they were trans. Just the amount of that scaring them alone, even before you get into the political nature of it, it's wildly inappropriate. These are 5-6-year-old kids are so little. You cannot understand how tiny their brains are. And they are not capable of ascertaining this kind of information. This is utterly absurd. You could not know the first thing about early childhood development and think that this was appropriate. So I would love to know what these people's training is because I'm not a kid person. I don't even like kids. I've never been a teacher in my life. And even I know that from a basic psychological developmental understanding of humans and how they develop. This is outrageous. Secondarily, I feel like Kai, or whatever her name is, wrote all of this. It's all her writing. It's all her narration. Is she just one person and she's woke kindergarten? Like, I'm
She's
kidding.
at least the main point of it. There may be other people involved, but it's mostly her,
I
from
think
what I
that's
can see.
mostly like just her, and she's like an ultimate grifter that had good connections and got this lucrative contract, because this is
the ultimate woke grift. But let me read you some more from the San Francisco Chronicle about how this worked out for the school in question. English and math scores hit new lows last spring, with less than 4% of students proficient in math and just under 12% at grade level in English, a decline of about 4 percentage points in each category. Efforts to reach the organization, Woke Kindergarten, for comment were not successful, with an automated response saying the founder, who also provides the training, so I think you're onto something, was recovering from surgery. District officials defended the program this past week, saying that Woke Kindergarten did what it was hired to do. The district pointed to improvements in attendance and suspension rates, and that the school was no longer on the state watch list, only to learn from the Chronicle that the school was not only still on the watch list, but also had dropped to a lower level.
it's just so cliche.
So it didn't shock. This is my shock face that spending hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars on Woke Kindergarten did not, in fact, help the students. But Hannah, here's what happened, and this is perhaps the craziest part of the whole story, when some teachers questioned this narrative. Maybe you can read this next bit for us.
Okay, so according to the San Francisco Chronicle, some Glassbrook teachers have questioned the decision to bring in the program, saying Woke Kindergarten is wrongly rooted in progressive politics and activism, with anti-police, anti-capitalism, and anti-Israel messages mixed in with the goal of making schools safe, joyful, and supportive for all children. This tension is reflective of the nation's ongoing culture wars, where the right and the left battle to influence what happens in classrooms. The Woke Kindergarten curriculum shared with schools includes wonderings, which pose questions for students, including, if the United States defunded the Israeli military, how could this money be used to rebuild Palestine? In addition, the woke word of the day, including things like strike, ceasefire, and protest, offer students a, quote, language of the resistance to introduce children to liberatory vocabulary in a way that they can easily digest, understand, and most importantly, use in their critiques of the system. This is kindergarten. Teacher Tiger Craven Neely said he supports discussing racism in the classroom, but found the Woke Kindergarten training confusing and rigid. He said he was told a primary objective was to, quote, disrupt whiteness in the school, and that the sessions were not a place to express white guilt. He said he questioned a trainer who used the phrasing, quote, so-called United States, as well as lessons available on the organization's website offering little comrade convos or positing a world without police, money, or landlords. Need to repeat this. They have something on their website called Little Comrade Convos.
You can't make it up.
Like, get your kids out of these schools now, right now. Leave your job, go pull them out, do anything you have to. This is terrifying for the future of our nation. And the fact that taxpayers are going to pay for this really does make me angry, Brad, because when we're working for school choice on the ground, which is a program I'm heavily involved in trying to get across the finish line right now in Tennessee, Kentucky, and Georgia, and there's a lot of momentum. Parents really want this. And one of the main pushbacks I'll hear from Democrats is, I don't want my tax dollars being used at religious schools. But you're fine with your tax dollars funding this, which is absolutely a cult, in public schools? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. If you want to take your tax dollars and go indoctrinate your kid into being a little commie loser in life, have at it. But the vast majority of normal, sane, successful people in life do not want that. And you should not get to use our tax dollars to indoctrinate our kids into an ideology that will leave them destitute. Like, this is, it is.
So
like,
it's
girdle.
definitely culty. It's culty because listen to what happened to the teacher who dared question this. Craven Neely, who is white and a self-described gay moderate, said he wasn't trying to be difficult when he asked for clarification about disrupting whiteness. What does that mean, he said, adding that such questions got him at least temporarily banned from future training sessions.
Amazing. Got
Yeah, we won't
canceled.
read any more from the report. People can go to the San Francisco Chronicle if they want the whole thing. But it's one of the craziest stories I've heard in a long time. And it's just one example. I understand that. It's just one school in one place, but they're using tax dollars to do it. And you're kidding yourself if you don't acknowledge the fact that this kind of progressive thinking, this woke ideology hasn't infiltrated much of our public school system. It's not everywhere. It's not all the public schools that are doing stuff like this. But if you go to the blue bubbles, you will scratch the surface and find a lot of stuff that maybe not quite this extreme, but is at least in this direction. And that's why, like you said, Hannah, my position is very clear on supporting school choice. I don't have an issue with parents. Well, I might have an issue with it, but it's their right, sending their kids to learn nonsense, right? But I do have an issue with kids being trapped into failing schools. And this is a public school where the students don't have another option. They're zoned into this by default unless their parents can afford to pay twice, once through taxes and then tuition again to send them to a private school. So they're stuck in this school that's failing them. It's not even teaching them to read and do basic math. And yet they're having woke ideological nonsense crammed down their throats by progressive grifters. I mean, I really think it's deeply objectionable, and it just shows why we need to break the system as it currently exists and create one where people can choose from options, because bad ideas don't survive long when we have competition. But when you have monopoly, which is what this is, they can last as long as they have special connections that can keep getting them, contracts spending somebody else's money, right? Taxpayer dollars. So to me, it is just a tiny, crazy anecdote example, but it sparks a conversation about the system and broader reforms.
Yeah, and I think, schools are given tons of money. It's a total falsehood that they're not. They are funded almost double the amount per child per year as the average private schools across the country, especially when you go to down south states. So everybody who says this is just a money problem, they need more money, they've been defunded, they're underfunded. No, they're not. They're given money like this, $250,000 to absolutely waste. They cannot even get the basics right, the very basic building blocks of an education. There is no hope that they're going to turn around. They're not even trying to. They are instead trying to focus on fixing society and addressing all of these other issues that really should be taking place somewhere other than schools. But before we move on, Brad, I do want to briefly respond to one of the videos that I didn't get a chance to comment on initially, which is the one where they're talking about We Keep Us Safe. And it made me think, there are some origins of all of this work that I think were noteworthy and needed, not in kindergarten, but more in the high school, middle school area, where we've had a problem with what they call the preschool to prison pipeline, where we've seen that kids interacting with teachers who are of different races than them often tend to get detention more. They're more likely to be suspended. They're more likely to start getting in early trouble. And then that can quickly lead to truancy issues. And they end up sort of following this pipeline into prison and actual criminal activity. And so there's been some work in the criminal justice reform movement to address some of that later on in schooling, where if you're working with teachers on recognizing some of that and alternative ways to deal with students who might be disruptive versus very punitive punishments, like kicking them out or suspending them right away, that could reduce that kind of pipeline. But it's interesting because those kinds of conversations, they start here, and then the leftists get a hold of them and they just move all the way over here to where now you're talking to kindergartners about defunding the police. And it's really ridiculous. None of this makes sense to talk to kindergartners about. But I have to say that one video I thought was a little based, because everything they were pointing to was charity and not the government taking care of the community. They're talking about how we feed one another, we house one another, and we take care of one another. And I do think this is so interesting to me with the defund the police movement. I'm not a defund the policer. I'm definitely a massively overhaul the policer. But there are some arguments within it where if they followed them to their logical conclusion, would be very limited government, localized control, and much more free market types of systems. But instead, they will say these kinds of things, right? They'll point out how the systems are failing, all these public systems are failing around them, and then they'll turn around and they'll argue for communism and for the government to have complete control over everything. And it makes no sense. Who do you think the police are? they're part of the government. So anyways, I just had to point that out. Every time I see these kinds of arguments for them, I just think it's so ironic.
Yeah, I mean, we can have a conversation about the police abolition. I don't support police abolition, right? And so they're saying don't arrest people. I completely disagree. I think the police should exist and should arrest people who actually violate other people's rights. I think the problem is they do a lot more than that now. But regardless, you know, that's not a pre-K or K or grade 1 conversation. And and the conversation about, like, you know, prison, school to prison pipelines is a question of like school policies and whether to have officers in the classroom and whether to refer to truancy court, and all of that really exists independently of whether we need to teach kindergartners about it.
Right. And to be clear, I don't support abolishing the police either, but I do think their arguments around it, if you follow their logical conclusion, which they don't have any logic within them. But if you did, you would end up where you would say, we need a much smaller government. Police need to be really tightly controlled and accountable, and they need to have far less jurisdiction. There needs to be far fewer laws that they're enforcing. We need to stop giving the government so much power. But instead, again, they go the opposite direction. And I just think it's utterly ridiculous.
Well, so I find it utopian, right? The vision of humanity espoused in that little 60-second clip is basically just, we'll all kumbaya and get along and take care of each other. And I find that like almost deeply misleading, miseducating children about the true nature of mankind, which if everyone was truly left alone would become a game of who conquers whom, right? And, you know, you and I aren't going to talk about it, but we were talking about something earlier about virtual reality and the bad things that are happening in virtual reality, where it is kind of a Wild West right now. There's no rules or regulations whatsoever, and some pretty terrible things are happening. And that is why I'm not an anarchist. But that philosophical discussion aside, I think all reasonable people can agree that it doesn't belong in the kindergarten classroom.